Hello and welcome to the Timeshift. I'm Chris Hall and this week we're reviewing the latest episode of Doctor Who entitled Demons of the Punjab. Now because this video is going to review of that aforementioned episode, if you don't want this episode spoiled for you for whatever reason, it's best to switch this video off now to avoid any spoilers. But for the rest of us, let us all dive headfirst into the Demons of the Punjab. Ooh! Another week of the time shift and still no intro for us. I've been very busy. Alright, tell a lie, I've not really been feeling that well and not sleeping that good either, but you know, that's a whole other thing. You're not here to listen about that, you're here to listen about Doctor Who stuff. But first of all, I want to know what you thought about this week's episode of Doctor Who. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Message me in the comment section on whichever website you're watching this on, and I will get back to you shortly. Either directly in the comment section themselves, or towards the end of next week's video, or, if it's particularly good, in a video all of its own. Ooh, how fantabuloso. I really don't know what to say about this week's episode of Doctor Who, if I'm going to be blunt with you, dear viewer. I think that it was fantastic. Almost completely. I certainly think that the opening section of this week's episode of Doctor Who was the weakest. The first third or so was kinda lackluster, and it only really came into its whole towards the second and third acts, but aside from that, the only other area of difficulty comes towards the performances, where I think that some of the performances were rather to say the least, but we'll talk about that in the performance section itself. For the episode itself, like I say, I think that the opening to this week's episode of Doctor Who was a little bit on the weak side. I don't really know what to put my finger down and say that's the defining aspect of it. It could be the fact that I think that the pacing towards the beginning of the episode was a little bit too quick. It never really let the whole situation settle down for a sufficient enough time for me to really get behind it. It just felt as though it was just trying to desperately rush towards the big sci-fi mystery aspect of it, rather than letting the time period really settle for us. This is a time period which I dare say the vast majority of the people watching it have no knowledge of. I'm going to put my hands up and be honest, I knew absolutely nothing about the partition of India before this week's episode of Doctor Who, and it's a testament to the quality of it that even though I'm not an expert by any means right now, I still know a little bit more than I did this time last week, which really goes to show that the whole edutainment angle that some of the historical episodes have been taking this year really has been paying off for me, and I hope that this is a sign of things to come, or at least the sign of a quality that we can really appreciate and hope for when it comes to our historicals to episodes. Whilst the opening section of this week's episode was a little bit weak, still desperately trying to make sure that it ran up to the time to get the sci-fi mystery kicked off. Aside from that, everything else in the episode really landed for me, particularly the fact that this week the villains not being villains and the villains teleporting away at the end of the episode thing actually worked this week. For the first time this entire series, that trope has actually paid off and felt as though it made sense. If you've not been keeping score, pretty much every villain that we've had this series has either teleported away, walked off, or just been left to its own devices because it's some kind of monster, some just little gribbly alien thing that's acting on its base instincts. It's just been left alone to do whatever it does. This week we have the assassin aliens, which I don't remember the names of, so for now let's just call them the assassins, who were set up as being the big villain of the episode, and then we learn, yeah, they're not the villains at all, they're actually rather benevolent, nice aliens. But the episode itself didn't treat that as though it was some kind of big twist, as though this is the real moral message of the episode, that people aren't always what you think that they are. Ooh, that kind of malarkey. No, that was just another facet of the episode. It's a historical episode of Doctor Who where the threat isn't some kind of squiggly wiggly space menace, it's human beings, which is an aspect of Doctor Who which I think has been desperately lacking. Almost all our villains have either been space monsters, space aliens, or human beings in the thrall and under the control of space monsters. You very rarely have human beings just being evil human beings. They have to have some kind of mind control thing going on. They have to be under the hypnotism of the Master or the Cybermen or someone like that. And to have an actual historical episode of Doctor Who where they actually go full hog on the historical kind of thing and just say, yeah, there was bloodshed, those horrible things going on, and you're going to see at least part of that with this week's episode of Doctor Who. I really can go for. Whilst isn't a time period which is going to be fresh in the minds of as many people as the civil rights movement, it's an era which hasn't really been discussed that much to children and many people in their educations at school. Like I say, there's not a great deal else I can discuss with this week's episode of Doctor Who on the outside of the performance section, because I genuinely think that it's really enjoyable. I think I love the design of the aliens in this week's episode. They look sufficiently creepy and alien, but at the same time, you get the idea of what they're supposed to be. They have an interesting presence about them, which does the whole bad guy, not bad guy thing in a sufficient way. They're not quite so villainous that you're meant to think they're villainous, but at the same time, they're not so soft and cuddly that you're supposed to go, ha ha ha, oh, isn't that adorable? It's eating my face, but you know what? It's so cute. The kind of thing that we got last week, but, you know, at this point I'm starting to waffle and talk about individual aspects of the episode, which, as a whole, don't really sink or make the episode any less good. Like I say, it's a fantastic episode. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's not quite as emotive as I think the Rosa Parks one, but I think that as a whole entity, it dealt with its time period in a very mature, clear way. It's made a lot more people aware of the nature of what happened in that time period without presenting it in a way which felt overly political, which I can really get behind. But in any case, now let us dive headfirst into the performance section, where I could say things that could upset people, but you know what, we'll have to see where we go with this. And so, the performance section, where I upset some people by saying I didn't like the vast majority of performances in this week's episode of Doctor Who. I'm sorry, but I really didn't. A lot of people in this week's episode of Doctor Who came across particularly wooden, and it's particularly worrisome as quite a few of those were people within the TARDIS crew, or the TARDIS fam, as we're having to call it, because, ha! Pop culture reference, but you know what, let's not worry about that particular rant. I'm just kind of startled by the fact that, you know what, let's not go down that route, but just say, look, I understand that when it comes to performances that more goes into it than just the actor's performance themselves. It's also the direction and the dialogue that they're given. I am adamant that with the right casting and the right dialogue and the right direction, you could get a fantastic performance out of anybody. Regardless of how wooden they may seem, you really give them the right material to work with and right advice, they will give you something that is truly remarkable and fantastic. With this week's episode of Doctor Who, despite the quality of the story, despite the quality of the directing, despite the quality of the cinematography, and the quality of some of the actors themselves, the vast majority of the performances this week came across rather stiff. The only real stand-up performance again was Bradley Walsh, but he's just doing the Bradley Walsh Doctor Who thing of him being slightly worldy and giving the grandfatherly advice, and the interpersonal stuff again works because it's a Chris Chibnall era episode of Doctor Who, so all that stuff is always going to work. It's just a shame that most of the performances surrounding that didn't really work. You can tell that they're not going to work because I'm mostly going to refer to people by their character and whom they are in the story rather than their character name. I think that Yaz's Nan, both the older version of her and the younger version of her, came across as kind of slightly wooden. Not slightly wooden, particularly when we get towards her being in the younger state, where it felt as though she was just maybe a tone away or so from acting like she should be some kind of royal family member. It felt that kind of proud, respectful, very stentorian, if that indeed is the right word, of delivering dialogue as though it's the absolute most crucial and aristocratic thing possible, which didn't really work with where she seemingly lives in that world. I mean, sure, she may be a proud woman, but it's felt had a level of regality to it that didn't really feel keeping with the character herself. And yeah, I suppose I was expecting to do the usual time travel thing of someone going back to meet their parents or grandparents and finding out that they're just as wacky and hip as they are. Oh! Yeah. Then you've got her fiancé, who was stoic and heroic, but not really much else. There were moments when he was delivering his big emotional dialogue where it just kind of felt like you just want to There's a factor missing from this to really push it over the edge to be something fantastic. It feels like a kind of performance that you get from someone from high school or sixth form, from that person, and you know who I mean by that person. That person in your theatre group in high school or sixth form who's the star performer, the person that they really think could make waves in the industry, who they give the big starring role to, and they give the big emotional speech moment to, and then when they deliver it, it's as flat as a pancake. You kind of feel that it should be more emotive than it is, that this should be the real sellout, standout moment of the story that it is. But here, no, it really didn't work. There were certain moments where even just delivering just placeholder dialogue, just the, come with me, quick, we must go, the forest, into the forest, stuff really felt even flatter than those actually lines were. As for the, we've also got little brother who was evil, who did alright. I kind of think that he was kind of a bit two-dimensional. He was the bad guy and evil and nasty because he listened to the radio, and that made him not like everybody. That's your rationale for him being that, religious prejudice, but you can explore a little bit more about that. You're going to develop that. You're going to tell us how that came to be, otherwise, other than just making allegoricus links to the modern era and divisiveness in the world at which we have. No? Oh, okay then. As for the TARDIS crew themselves, Ryan's accent still hasn't really found a place to it which it wants to land. It's not quite Yorkshire anymore. It's starting to slip ever slowly southerner. Again, Yaz, despite the fact that this was the Yaz episode, just kind of felt as though she was there. The person who should have been the emotional heart to the story didn't really seem to have that much to her, which really felt like she was the emotional core to the episode. And Jodie Whittaker. Look, I really doubt that there's ever going to be a time where I'm going to turn against a Doctor's performance, or rather an actor's performance as the Doctor. There may be individual episodes where I may question the logic of the Doctor, where I might question the writing and the direction of the character, but I don't think there'll ever be a day where I'll just turn around and say, this is the episode that ruined Doctor Who for me. Oh! I don't think you're ever going to get that for me, particularly when it comes to the performances, but I know that I'm not the first one to pick up on this, because there's been plenty of the Doctor Who, more like Doctor Who Cares, oh! Yeah. Kind of videos where it has Jodie Whittaker gurning on it, but my god, that woman gurns way too much. And they just seem to be making an aspect, they're making a theme of it, a trait of it. I don't know if this is intentional about Jodie Whittaker. This is supposed to be her Doctor's thing, her quirk. If it's supposed to be, I suppose I can put my hands up and say I'm not a fan of it and leave it there, but if this is inadvertent, if this is just a byproduct of a performance, I think someone needs to sit her down and just say, look, you're not Les Dawson, gurning ain't the thing to be doing. I mean, just how many times have we just seen her go within Doctor Who itself? No. Unless this is a thing, stop. We got the footage of you to prove it's happening, so unless this is a trait of your Doctor, stop it. And even if it is a trait of your Doctor, cut it down or cut it out. Look, like I say, whilst I didn't like the performances of the vast majority of people in this episode, there wasn't anything that was offensively bad. It's stuff that I was willing to forgive because I was so wrapped up in the moment that my willing suspension of disbelief made me believe that these were genuine people in 1947 India, Pakistan, and not just bad actors. That's how much I was wound up and invested in the episode, which is truly saying something, because if I wasn't invested in this episode, holy hell, my rant would have been a lot bigger and more venomous. But you know what, we're waffling for time now, so let's just dive headfirst into the overview. And so the overview. What did I think of the episode as a whole? And as a whole, yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was really fun, exciting, informative and emotive. Even if the central performances, not just by our additional cast of the week, but also our main performers themselves, weren't that particularly great, I still enjoyed it for the most part. I was really invested in the story itself, and whilst I was slightly bummed out by the fact that we didn't have the Doctor Who theme to end, I liked this version of it, which had a more of a Asian style to it, I'll just say. I really enjoyed that, and it really worked with the emotive quality of the story itself, and unlike the Rosa Parks episode where it ended up with the Radio 1 Top 40 music style song at the end of it, I felt that this was more keeping not just in the tone but the time period in a way which felt more like a seamless transition, and the fact that this was essentially just another version of the Doctor Who theme really landed for me and ended up feeling more keeping with the show itself than I really think that the ending to the Rosa Parks story did. But even so, the only downside to this week's episode, again, are the performances being kind of lackluster. I hope that was just a case of the story and the writing, and we're not starting to see even more cracks forming. I mean, you know, this is a series of Doctor Who where we're not going to have a Christmas special because they can't think of an idea for the Christmas special. That might be a rant for a later point, but holy hell, if you can't think of an idea for one particular episode, where the hell does that leave us with next year's series? Ugh. But you know what, we'll get onto that shortly. I don't know if I'll do an individual video ranting about that, or I'll do it for the series overview, but we'll soon see about that in the future. In any case, I just got distracted there because my screen just went on to the screensaver and it freaked me out thinking that I'd lost power. I did enjoy this week's episode of Doctor Who, but you know what? What about you, dear viewer? Did you love this week's episode of Doctor Who? Did you hate it? Let me know in the comment section in whichever website you're watching this on, and I will get back to you shortly, either directly in the comments themselves, or in there towards the end of a future video, or in a video all of its own, if it's particularly talksome worthy. And of course, this is bearing in mind that this is a video that I've posted there myself. I mean, I post this on the Rooster Teeth website and YouTube. So unless it's on those two formats, you know what, I ain't going to get back to you. Comment on there. And whilst you're there, particularly on YouTube, like us, share us, subscribe to us, click the bell. Maybe it'll work. I've clicked my bell for many people, and I've yet to get a response. Holy hell, but that, yeah, oh my god. No, sorry, I'm going to get onto a tangent here. But I just want to say, I've clicked my bell for a number of YouTube channels, and I've still not got a sodding notification. I have to go manually looking there like some kind of caveman. And I want my videos, goddammit. I want my miniature wargaming related funness. I don't want to have to deal with this looking around stuff. Anyway, let's not worry about that stuff. Next week, we've got a story about an evil mega corporation whose main deal is delivery. No, it's not a video about Amazon. Ha 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 ha! It's an episode about Kablam! With a title like that, I'm slightly worried where next week's episode is going to be going. Maybe we'll have some heavy-handed moral learnings. Or maybe, just maybe, this will be the first sci-fi episode this series that won't suck. We'll soon find out. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode of Timeshift. Like, share, subscribe, share likes, particularly like us, comment, and do all the rest of the stuff. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.